the. What's up, Patreon? Welcome back to another drum lesson. Today we're gonna go over Cream. Cream is pretty much 100% rock drumming. It's not as nuanced as Romantic and Drunk 2. Similar to Drunk 2, I had 2 crash cymbals when we recorded Patience, so there are some of those like cymbal melodies in here. There's just like a few timing things. The fills I think are more flashy than actually complicated. But yeah, let's dive into it. So we start the song on the left hand crash. So just a 4 count in. I think the tempo is like 148, something like that. Just, you know, for nerds. So we come in with the kick in the left hand crash, played with your right hand on beat 1. And this is where I go crazy trying to figure out like what I played, because the things I don't really think about are like the transitions between like the cymbals and the hi-hats. But I'm pretty sure it just goes straight into playing the hi-hat and snare on beat 2, and then you're playing 8th notes on the hi-hat from there. Because it just sounds weird to be like... It's a little difference, but I think it sounds more correct to what I played. Leaving that first... the and of 1 out of there. It's just like a little transition that I don't really think about, and I just never think about that kind of stuff. So one of the trickier parts when you first start playing drums is getting the timing of the 16th notes down. Most beats that you learn when you start out are all like locked in with the 8th notes. So if we're doing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, you're playing that all aligned with your right hand playing the 8th notes. And then for 16ths, you're playing in between the 8th notes. It helps to just kind of break it down. If you just look at what your hands are doing, are you playing them together? Are you playing just right, left? You can really just break it down to like simple things like that, and it should help you figure out where the placements of those 16th notes are. So then we come on beat 2, we're playing the snare and the hi-hat together, and this is kind of where the 16th note placement starts to come into play, because you're playing the and of 2 just on the hi-hat, and then you're playing the of 2 on the snare. So it sounds like 2 and so together, hi-hat, snare, 2 and And again, we're not playing the 8th notes like totally straight. They're you kind of have like a flow of like, so the quarter notes are more pronounced. I've been told I kind of have Lars Ulrich syndrome. Some music nerd told me that. And it's like, okay, dude. He's like, yeah, all your 8th notes sound like quarter notes. Like, they just disappear. It's like, okay, you know, whatever works. I don't know. But yeah, it could sound like I'm just playing quarter notes, but I am doing the 8th notes in there. So 1, 2, and 1, 2, and I'd say like the trickiest part of this song is kind of where the accents land, because a lot of the times they're on the and of 4. Fills you can interchange to play whatever you want. So like the kind of flashier fills are interchangeable, but where the hits land, you just have to be in time with the song, because it goes along with the guitars. Having said that, so the second crash, we do play on the and of 4, and we get into that beat by playing 3 and on the kick with the hi-hat, and then the snare on beat 4, and then the and of beat 4 with the kick drum and the right hand crash cymbal. 3 and 4 and. So this will probably take the longest to explain, but then we repeat this beat like constantly throughout the song, so should be smooth sailing from that, I think, I hope. Putting together both parts of that beat sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we come from that and a 4 on the right hand crash. We go into playing the hi-hat just on its own for beat 1 of the second measure, and then you play the kick on the and of 1 with the hi-hat of the second measure, and that kind of ties in that little weird accent part to just playing like more of a straight eighth note groove. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Following that and on the 1 of the second measure, we play the snare and the hi-hat together on beat 2, the hi-hat by itself on the and of 2, and then we do a, then we're kind of locked into that eighth note groove. So from there, then we're just playing 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then we're finally kind of done with one go around of the beat. So you are playing the and of 4 with the hi-hat and the kick drum on, it ends up being like measure 3. And that kind of just brings you back to playing that same groove. Once you get that down, you pretty much have most of the song. Because then we just play that again, the same amount of time for like 3 measures. So that's the second time we play it at the beginning of the song, then we do it one more time for a total of 3 times. And then we play that same beat like one more time. So a total of 4 times to start the song. The only difference on the 4th go around is you just play beat 4 with the hi-hat on the snare. You don't play the and of 4 because we just go into a build up from there. So when the vocals come in, we're playing a kind of build-up thing. You play beat 1 with the left-hand crash, the snare, and the kick drum. And then you're playing all the eighth notes with the snare, floor tom, and kick drum all together until you play the and of 4 on the right-hand crash with the kick drum. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you can either come in on the ride, the right-hand crash cymbal. Sometimes I do like to come in and out of the build up on 2 cymbals, so. But again, like if I don't do that in the playthrough of the song and then I'd play it later, it's just like whatever you feel in the moment. I switch it up all the time. So just playing it from that beat where you end with the hi-hat and the snare on beat 4, I'll play into the build up just so you get you see how that goes. And then since there's that accent on the and of 4, again, kind of when we come back into it, it's a little weird. You're playing the downbeat just on its own on the ride, and then you play the and of 1 with the kick, and 1 and 2, and 1 and 2. Once you get that down, it's a lot easier with all these beats. So after the build-up, when we go to the ride, we're playing beats 2 and the and of 2 on the snare with the ride. 3 and we play on the kick drum and also on the ride, and then we just play 4 on the snare with the ride, and then the ride on its own. So this isn't exactly what it is in the song at the moment, but basically, like, if you take the accents out, a lot of the beat is just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So like that 2 snare hit followed by the single snare hit, kind of eighth note rock groove thing. That might help if you can hear where that lands. Then we play the 3 and on the kick drum, again locking in with the ride cymbal eighth notes. Then we play another 2 and on the snare, again locking in with the ride cymbal. Then we play 3 and on the kick drum, locking in with the ride cymbal. We play just beat 4 with the snare and the ride cymbal, and then we play the kick drum on its own on the and of 4. So from that kick drum on its own on the and of 4, you're going over to the snare and the left hand crash for beat 1, and then you play the kick on its own again on the and of 1. And then you bring in the hi-hat on beat 2 with the snare, and then you're playing again the kick drum, but this time with the hi-hat on the and of 2. And 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and then we're gonna play beat 3 on the hi-hat with the snare. So from beat 3 with the hi-hat and the snare, we play a little fill that starts on the and of 3. You're playing that with the right hand on your snare drum, followed by the of 3 you play with your left hand on the rack tom, and then you play 4E right left on your floor tom. 3 and a 4E. 3 and a 4E. And then again, sorry, because like usually you would end this on the downbeat, and then it's really easy to explain how to go into the next beat from that. But we do end this fill on the and of 4 with the right hand crash and the kick drum. 3 and a 4E and. 3 and a 4E and. Ending on the and of 4 kind of affected the beats coming after it. Again, you play the downbeat on the ride just by itself for beat 1, and then you're playing the and of 1 again with the kick drum and the ride. So we're also playing the snare on beat 2 of the next thing. So just to show that kind of transition between the fill, and then I still haven't quite unlocked how to explain like the weird transition from coming on the and of 4 into the and of 1 of the next beat, but maybe this will help just if you can hear it. 3 and a 4E and 3 and a 4E and 3 and a 4E and 2 3 and a 4E and 2. We are playing the 2 and that locks in with the eighth notes on the snare and the ride cymbal, followed by the 3 and with the kick drum on the ride cymbal, and just a single hit on the snare with the ride cymbal for 4, and then the ride cymbal by itself. So this is one of my more favorite fills. It kind of reminds me of Drain You by Nirvana. There's that fill. It's pretty similar to that. It starts on beat 1. I also really like how it matches up with Marissa's vocals. I think it's cool. So it starts with the left hand crash with the kick drum, and then you start a snare roll on the and of 1. And then you're going to play the of 1 with your left hand on the snare, and then you're playing 2E and right left on the on beat 2. You also start beat 2 with a kick drum. 1 and a 2E and 1 and a 2E and. Then on beat 3, we're playing the right hand on the snare with the kick drum. We're playing the E of 3 with your left hand on the rack tom, followed by the floor tom on the and of 3, which is then followed by a kick drum on the of 3. E and And then, I guess one of the like only nuanced part about this song is that it does include a little bit of some flams, which I go into more in depth in the romantic video, lesson video, which is still up on Patreon. Basically, you're playing your right and your left hand on the snare, like pretty much together, but like ever so slightly, like not. Like just go for it. Unless you're like really just like hammering it like at the same time, like you could just like hurt yourself. But if you're just going for it, like trying to kind of play at the same time, it most likely will work. So then on beat 4, we're playing the snare with the flam, and then we're playing the kick drum on the E of 4, and then we're playing on the floor tom right left. 4E and 4E and 4E and 4E and Actually, I think I do most of the time start that beat just like from playing the beat, so I'll like kind of just like play the downbeat on the ride on beat 1. But if you want to kind of give it more emphasis and start it on the crash, that's going to sound cool too. So from that fill, we are ending on the left-hand crash with the kick drum. And then we go back into that beat that we played in the beginning. And then on the second time we play this beat here, we do switch it up a little bit in the second measure of that by playing the 4 with the hi-hat and the snare, but then also playing the of 4 with the hi-hat and the snare. So just a little accent like bop bop. And then after that little accent on the snare, we're playing 1 and on the kick drum with the just the snare on beat 2. Also, all that is locking in with 8th notes on the hi-hat. Then we play the and of 2 just on the hi-hat, followed by 3 and on the kick drum with the hi-hat. And then we play a little fill that is just 4 and you play that right hand on the snare, left hand on the rack tom on the E of 4, and then the on the floor tom right left. One and 2, 3 and 4 and then we just go back into that same beat. No adjustments here. And then again, we go into the same beat. The only difference here is on beat 4, we're not going to play the of 4 after that, because that's going to lead into the next part. Part of the song, the standing at the gates of my hell part, we start with like a little fill. So we begin the fill with the left hand crash and the kick drum on beat 1, and then we play the of 1 on the snare, followed by 2 all played on the snare, right left, crash, right, left, right, left, right, left. So a total of 6 hits on the snare. 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. So then the next part's a little weird with just the accents, but it's all 8th notes, I think. So the hi-hat and the kick drum are played on beat 3. Then you do a flam on the and of 3. 3 and 3 and. And then the kick drum is just played on its own on beat 4, followed by the crash cymbal of your choice. Sometimes I even play 2 crash cymbals here on the and of 4 with the kick drum. 3 and 4 and. Again, since kind of the downbeat is on the and of 4, again, we kind of go into, I really hope I'm explaining this in like not a crazy complicated way, because I keep like thinking about it, I'm like, you're not making any sense. But it's kind of hard to explain how it's like and 1 and with the kick drum, like the and 1 and. So beat 1 here is played with this cymbal, the ride cymbal on its own, and then you play the kick drum on the and of 1. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So after we get past that that weird transition, we're doing 2 and on the snare, so the bop bop, and then 3 and on the kick, and then just 4 on its own. And then the next measure we're doing the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So that's like kind of the main theme is the, but then all those just like little accents kind of is what makes it hard to explain. Now this feels a little weird because I thought it was triplets, but I don't know if I've mentioned that I program all this stuff into Logic before doing these lessons, because like I just don't really count things out. I just kind of play what I feel. But if I just sat down and tried to record that in a lesson, I know I'm gonna mess it up, and I rather kind of have some guide to try to explain these things. So when I put it, I programmed it into Logic. It actually came out that I guess this is just 8th notes. I thought it was fancier than it is. So the main mechanic of this fill is you're playing a flam on the snare, and then it's followed by a hit with your right hand on the ride cymbal with the kick drum, and then it's followed by your left hand playing a hi-hat on, I guess it would be the next 8th note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It totally makes sense that it's 8th notes. But yeah, like if I didn't put it into Logic, I would have totally not known that. So this fill here is you're playing that, the flam on beat 1, followed by the kick and the ride on the and of 1, followed by the hi-hat on beat 2, and then you cycle that again. This time the snare is playing a flam on the and of 2, followed by the ride and the kick on beat 3, followed by the hi-hat on the and of 3, and then you're playing just the flam on beat 4 on the snare, and then you kind of end it by playing the crash cymbal of your choice, whatever feels most comfortable coming out of it. I wouldn't play the ride cymbal just to kind of switch it up so you realize that you're coming out of this fill, and that's on the and of 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. See, it sounds fancy when it's fast. Again, then you go into the ride cymbal playing the downbeat, followed by the and of 1, catching that kind of groove on the kick drum with the ride cymbal. And then you're playing the 2 hits on the snare on beat 2, followed by the 2 hits on the kick drum, followed by the 1 hit on the snare, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 So then we end that there with just the hi-hat and the snare on beat 4 to transition to the next part. So we'll cover a lot of ground here because for like the next few measures, it's just building up. So we're starting with the snare and the kick drum on the first beat. You can play whichever crash cymbal is more comfortable for you, and then just don't play the ride cymbal because that's the cymbal we're building up on. So you start with the downbeat, the 1 on the whichever cymbal's comfortable, and the snare and the kick drum, and then you move over to the ride cymbal for the build up to play all the subsequent 8th notes. Wow, I kind of said that word right, and then my lisp caught up with me. And then when we're building up on the ride, we're playing the floor tom with the ride and also the kick drum. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So that whole build up part, that like one go around would be 2 measures. If you're just counting when we do the accent on the crash. The first time is with the snare, but then after that, every time we do the crash, it's just with the floor tom too. So just the snare on that first time until we bring it in later, but we'll get to that. So then the next, on the third measure, when we crash again, you're going to do it on, when I recorded it, I did it on the right because you're still building up on the ride cymbal, so it's just more comfortable. When I don't have another cymbal, I usually just like accent the ride cymbal, like that hit harder on the first one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So after playing that 4 times, on the 5th go around, we don't accent again with the crash cymbal. Instead, we just move to the snare and start building up there for 1 measure. And then on the second measure, once we've added the snare in, we're doing that up until beat 3. And then we do a snare roll, which is and a 4E and a, so 6 hits, right, left, right, left, right, left. And then that will take us into the guitar solo. So we start the guitar solo section playing that same beat we played in the beginning. And then we play it, the second time we play it here, we do play a little variation. So we're going to start playing start by playing the beat the same way, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 and, into the 1 and 2 and. Here's where the little variations kind of start. We do 3 and 4 and. So all together with the hi-hat, with the 8th notes, 2 kicks on the kick, and then the 2 hits on the snare drum. And then in the next measure, we repeat the 2 kick drum hits and then the 2 snare drum hits, both still with the 8th notes and the hi-hat. So 1 and 2 and then on beats 3 and the and of 3, we play the hi-hat and the kick, 3 and then we do a little fill that starts on beat 4 with the flam on the snare. So this fill happens kind of quickly. I guess the whole song's kind of fast actually, but you do a flam on the snare, the E of 4 you play on the kick drum, and then the and of 4 you play on the floor tom, and you actually end on the of 4 on the rack tom. 4E and 4E and 4E and 4E and 3 and So starting with the little kind of accents on the snare, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 3 and So then we play the main beat again. No extra hits on the snare, just the same, just single hits on the 2 and 4s there. And then we play that main beat again. On the third measure here, we're going to do a little transition. It's that same kind of snare roll that is 6 hits long. That it starts on the and of 3 on that third measure. You do start that fill, so the fill's kind of playing like in the beat. So 1 and 2, 3 and a 4 and a 1 and 2, 3 and a 4 and a. All right, so that's the guitar solo section. We're really moving along here, but you know, the song's kind of short, so. So after the snare roll, the and a 4E and we go into the final like Gates of My Hell part of the song. So this is like a little tricky too, just because of like the accent placements, but again, it's just 8th notes. The snare and the kick pattern here is actually pretty simple, except there is a flam on the and of 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare, kick, kick. The tricky part, I guess, comes in with the cymbals. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you play the crash on the downbeat, and then you play 8th notes on the hi-hat until you take your hand away to play the flam on the snare. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. And then after that flam, you are playing just a kick drum on its own on beat 4, and then you do the accented hit on the and of 4. And you could do that on whatever cymbal's comfortable. I usually would do it on the right hand crash. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then after that and of 4 on the crash cymbal, again we play the ride cymbal on its own, and then kind of start the beat on the and of 1 with the kick. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So this is one of the trickier parts of the song. One, because there's a triplet involved, but it also starts kind of weird because you start on the downbeat on the snare with the cymbal. Little difference either way, whichever way's more comfortable. You can either play the and of 1 on the kick drum, just on the kick drum alone, or you can throw in the hi-hat there. So 1 end or 1 end. Either one's cool. And then you're playing the snare and the hi-hat again together on beat 2. 1 and 2, or 1 and 2. Either one. So this is a little tricky just because I don't know, even though I put it into Logic, like I can't read the notation that well. I have like a basic understanding of it, so I don't know exactly where this triplet fill starts, but I know where it ends. So after beat 2, then we're playing a quick little right left kick, triplet, triplet. Triplets basically are like you're playing 3 notes in the space of 1, but even like knowing that kind of definition, I can't figure out where this actually starts, but you're playing right hand on the floor tom, you're playing your left hand on the rack tom, followed by a kick, so triplet. But it's kind of quick into a flam, so it's and the flam is on beat 3. So you're coming from the triplet to the flam, and then you're playing starting on the and of 3, you're playing the snare with your right hand, the rack tom on the of 3, and then you're playing 4E right left on the floor tom, and then you end it on the crash cymbal with the kick drum on the and of 4. And then so we come out of that fill again because it's on the and of 4. I know this is kind of repetitive. I'm still worried that I'm not explaining it right. We go into that kind of like where you play the ride cymbal on its own on the first beat, and then you're playing the kick drum with the ride cymbal on the and of 1. Just kind of how it falls into place with having that accent on the and of 4 into that kind of surfer beat thing, that do do dot dot do do dot. And then at the end of this, we are gonna just play beat 4 on the snare, and you can play the cymbal. So don't stop playing on beat 4. You play the cymbal on its own, but since we're going into like a little fill, you don't do the and on the kick drum. Not to say that it would make like a huge difference, but it probably just would make the next fill easier. So we'll take this piece by piece. The first part of the fill is you're playing the snare with your right hand with a kick, and you kind of just keep your like left hand over the rack tom for the beginning part of the fill. You're playing the E of the first beat on the rack tom, and again you kind of just hold your left hand over the rack tom for like the beginning of the fill. The and of 1 you play on the floor tom, followed by the of 1 you're playing on the rack tom. So 1 E and 1 E and 1 E and 1 E and for the next part you're playing the downbeat on beat 2 with the snare and the kick drum again, and you're playing the E of 2 again on the rack tom. You're kind of keeping the hand just hovered up there, and then you're playing the and of 2 with the kick and the snare again. So for the beginning of this fill, it's easy to remember that the kick drum is like exactly with the right hand when it hits the snare. And then the of 2, you're also playing on the rack tom with your like hand that's still kind of just remaining hovering over there. So that's easy. Kick with the snare, rack tom, kick with the snare, rack tom. 2 E and 2 E and so for the first 2 parts, 1 E and 2 E and So then beat 3 here is actually going to start on the floor tom, and then there's going to be a kick drum on its own on the E of 3, followed by that flam that we're talking about on the and of 3, and then a kick drum on the of 3 right after the flam. 3 E and 3 E and you're going from that rack tom on the of 2 to the floor tom on beat 3 to the kick, if that even helps. 3 E and 3 E and the first 3 little parts of the fill. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and then thankfully, like, that's like the most complicated thing. Once you get that down, it's just 4 E on the floor tom, again, right, left, and then the and a 4 we end on with a crash and a kick. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. I hope that lined up. It's hard to play that and like say the whole thing. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. So again, kind of like keep your left hand over the rack tom. You're kind of working under it, so. I guess a good thing is like you're kind of keeping your left hand on the rack tom for the beginning of the fill until you move it for the flam, and then you're going to that floor tom. So it's kind of like you're working under that left hand until you come together for the that flam. So. Hope that made sense. And then again, we're coming out of that and a 4 into that like little kind of surfer beat thing. Kind of a combination of like the previous Gates of My Hell parts, like these 8th notes, kind of weird accent thing. We start with the downbeat on beat 1 with the left hand crash cymbal with the snare, followed by the hi-hat and the kick drum on the and of 1. Then we play beat 2 with the snare and the hi-hat. The and of 2 we play with the kick drum and the hi-hat, as well as beat 3 we play with the kick drum and the hi-hat. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. Then the and of 3 we play the snare drum with the flam, followed by the beat 4 is with just a kick drum on its own, and then we do the hits with a kick drum and a crash cymbal on the and of 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then from that we go back into that like little surfer beat thing for the final time. And then finally, to end this song, there's hits that are kind of synchronized with everybody. And those hits are played first with the crash cymbal, snare, and the kick drum on beat 1. And then for beat 2, we move it down to the hi-hat, snare, and kick. Then there's like a little 16th note played on just the kick drum, which is the of 2. And then you play the beat 3, you play with the snare and hi-hat. And then to end the song, because we're ending like everything on the ands of beats, this actually ends with a hi-hat and a kick on the and of 3. So 1, 2, a 3 and. 1, 2, a 3 and. All right, so I think we did it. Hopefully that helps you in your drum journey. Thank you again for all your support, Patreon. You guys are seriously awesome, and I hope you have fun rocking out on the drums to Cream. Goodbye.